introduce Michelle Cousins to talk on new technologies for the pastoral zone.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Thanks for inviting me to talk today. So I'm really going to cover off, it's a very broad topic, livestock technology, as you'd be aware. So it's just very much an all-encompassing talk about what's out there and just trying to relate it back to the pastoral zone and what's really important for you guys. So livestock technology encompasses a broad range of applications, and its uses and benefits to producers are obviously going to depend on your individual needs. So it can range from anything from electronic identification through to smart tags, telemetry systems, shearing shed design, and so on. Today, I'm going to focus predominantly on ERD and individual animal management, technology for the pastoral zone, and new and developing technologies that are coming out there. So there's obviously going to be some things not covered in today's talk, but I've tried to make sure that I touch on most things that I'm aware of. But there's a lot happening in this space, so I'm very aware that there will be some things that I have missed, so my apologies for that. So I really want to today just run through a little bit on electronic identification and why we want to use it, and mainly because it's a bit of a buzzword in the industry at the minute. We're seeing PIRSA with their red meat and wool program promote a lot within this space, and so I think it's important that we cover off on what the benefits are. Some of the applications are not applicable for the pastoral industry, but a lot of them you can adapt, and it's certainly being picked up by quite a few pastoralists that I know of. So ERD is a technology that facilitates individual animal management, and it does that through improved data accuracy. It helps eliminate those tag reading errors. I think if anyone's tried to read sheep or cattle ear tags, we all know how difficult that is. Improves stock handling and less stress. A reduction in time taken to collect data. And most importantly, it's that improved data collation and recall. So if we can collect the information easier and have it in a format that's ready for us to use, whether that's in real time or whether we're going to go away and crunch some numbers and then come back through the animals. If that process is simple, then we're more likely to use it and implement it. So the important thing with electronic tags is understanding why we use it, and that's what individual animal management comes in. So this involves the selection, management and marketing of animals based on measured or individual production rather than based on the traditional flock management principles. So it allows us to maximise our returns from our high value animals within the flock and minimise the low cost animals. It allows for the exploitation of the variation that exists within flocks of key profit drivers, e.g. wool and meat traits. And my apologies, I do traditionally speak to a lot of sheep producers, but it applies to cattle obviously as well, exactly the same principles. So I should have their flocks and herds. And there's new technologies out there obviously that exist to help improve your productivity and profitability of your livestock enterprises, and it's utilising that to look at how you can incorporate these into your management practices. So if we looked at and this can be a little hard to read on your screens, but under the traditional mob-based system, what we used to do is, and we do still do this very much in the pastoral zone still, because it is very much based on numbers and how you can manage them coming into the yards. But our poor performers are retained throughout, and we generally tend to cull on age group only. So you can see that colour-coded system there on the traditional mob-based. So really we're just culling them, and in this case it's as a 6-year-old ewe. And under the individual animal selection model, what we're looking to do is identify those poor performers early. They're going to cost us the same to run as our high performers, and we want to take them out of that system as early as we can to reduce the costs incurred associated with those animals. And we want to keep those superior animals where it is practical within the flock for whether that's another year or 2 years, depending on your own systems and also on the animals as well. So it can't just be on measured traits. We need visual in that as well. There's no point having no teeth in an animal and keeping them right through. So just a very practical way to have a look at what your flock or herd makeup is, and to look at the benefits of transitioning from that mob-based to an individual animal-based selection system. This is my very poor bell curve, which just shows what we're trying to do. So we're trying to take those poor performers out. We're going to try and keep those better performing animals within the system longer. And so therefore, we're going to try and shift that average of our flock to the right. So we're going to try and improve our productivity and profitability by looking at those individual traits. So to be able to do that, we obviously need information or data to make informed decisions. So in this example, we're just looking at the number of lambs born. So whether that's through using pregnancy scanning, or you're just wet drying the animals, or you're looking at marking. But you can see there, if we looked at number of lambs born per ewe, you've obviously got a dry ewe in the back. You've got your single bearing ewe there, and you've got your twin bearing ewe at the front. So we want to be able to, in this instance, identify those animals that will produce the twins year on out, obviously taking into account seasonal and any other management concerns with that. But it's going to give you the ability to make some decisions. And that's where utilising EID makes recalling and using that information a lot easier. So I really just wanted to make sure I touched on the principles of that when we're talking about technology, because it is something that's very topical in the industry at the moment. So just quickly looking at what equipment is out there. So we have the stick or handheld readers that are produced by a number of companies now that are out there. They have progressed quite a lot in the last few years on their functionality and what you can do. And I've just popped there like some of the features to consider if you're looking to go down this path of what you need to look for when you're purchasing. So, and obviously it's going to depend very much on your own enterprise and what you're wanting to record and how you're going to recall that information when you go back through your animals. You have a lot of the scale head indicators out there now that are really like mini computers. And so these smart scale heads, the common brands include Gallagher, TrueTest and Tapari. And the features there to consider are the number of traits that can be recorded, the number of records that can be stored on the device, and the size of the screen and font. We want to be able to easily read it, and ease of data transfer and the software that comes with it. So a lot of these now come with quite a lot of software, enables you to recall quite a few traits that you can come up on your screen, up to 16 or more on some of them. And they have quite good software that will allow you to track growth rates. So if you're predominantly a meat operation, they can be pretty much all you need to take advantage of EID and individual animal management. You've also got panel readers with the common brands, once again being that Allflex, Gallagher, Shearwell, Elise and TrueTest. Obviously it's not an exhaustive list, and features there are ease of use and size and purpose. So obviously what you need for cattle and sheep, it's related to the size of the panel reader to be able to pick up that tag on the animal as they're coming through a drafting race. They also can be quite portable. So this is what we use, both the tree test and the Gallagher on our pregnancy scanning crates when we're recording the pregnancy status against the electronic tags. And we just have hooks mounted on the panel reader so that we can take it on and off the crates depending on whether we need to use them or not. So you can, same applies if you've got yards throughout your property, or you've got different holdings. You can actually have a panel reader that you can move around quite easily. You can also then go down that whole path of the auto drafts and then your sheep handlers. So these have really progressed in the last 5 years, and just that ability to be able to weigh or draft livestock automatically, especially when you're dealing with large numbers in the pastoral zone. I think we're going to start seeing more producers become aware of that benefit. I think it's to be able to work out the cost effectiveness of implementing it on a large number of animals has always put people off. But there's some really good tools out there to be able to work out where you can make gains and what you can achieve, to be able to work out whether going down this path is the right thing for your business. So uses for ERD for producers. So usage is obviously going to depend very much on your own needs and profit drivers, but they could include pedigree information, weights and weight gain, condition scores associated with that, your vaccine and parasite history, and also your management, paddock movements can go in there as well, supplement history, and obviously your biosecurity, and I know there is a talk coming up on that soon as well with Paul, but that's going to be more predominant, and to be able to easily recall records is going to be a big thing. So fertility, pregnancy scanning data, birthing, rearing outcomes, seeing a big increase in the amount of producers recording that, and we'll actually start to see some really good data coming through now that we've got some quite good data sets on all of that, on the benefits of being able to do that and identifying those animals that are producing the most lambs or calves. So there'll be some very good cost analysis coming through on that within the next year or so. Fleece measurements, obviously micron fleece weights. So really it's giving you the ability to make decisions based on that individual animal performance and tailor your management production systems accordingly. Obviously, the principles of individual animal management, you do not need to go down the path of electronic tags to be able to do that. You may notch the dry ewes, for example, that come through so that you know the next year if they present again, they get taken out. So the principles apply no matter what way you look to identify those animals. It's just ERD does make that process a whole lot easier and allows you to take advantage of those new technologies to make it so much simpler to handle your livestock. A big thing with pastoral zone in just making sure, well, everywhere really in the rural industry, is that labour saving is just going to be quite a big thing. Stock handling ease, all those decisions need to come into play when we're thinking about how we utilise new technology. So there has been lots of studies on the benefits of utilising ERD. Really the only thing I wanted to highlight out of here was this was a study done by Hamish Dixon for MLA on maximising the value of technology for sheep. And I would have thought obviously that return is possibly will change with cattle just because of the value of the animals, but the cost benefit of utilising ERD to improve breeding and selection decision was approximately $4.12 return for every dollar invested. So some quite significant gains to be made. And there is some really good papers on the MLA website that you can actually go and have a look at, to have a look at how they've actually applied these findings and what producers have done. So moving on, just looking at what technology people are using for different enterprises. So when we're talking to wool producers, obviously the main traits that people are recording or measuring are the fibre diameter and other associated fleece measurements, such as your CV, SDs and comfort factors, your greasy fleece weights, pedigree and pregnancy status. And obviously that list is quite exhaustive depending on what individual producers are wanting to chase as their key profit drivers. Benefits again with utilising the ERD is the easy collation and recall of data for your visual classing, the allocation of ewes to wool or meat production, and genetic evaluation with Merino Select and RAM Power. So an example of some of the reports that can be generated by collating that information so much easier. You can then, in this instance, they've used a RAM Power index in those last two columns to actually put a value on a dual purpose index for, these are all merino sheep. Obviously, we've got fleece weight and micron data as well as body weights. So they can actually use that as a quick guide to go to highlight their better animals based on that dual purpose index. So when we're looking at meat sheep, the main traits obviously that we're seeing collected there are your body and growth rates, pregnancy status, carcass scanning with your eye muscle and fat depth, and condition scores. So the benefits there are utilising that weight and growth rate to meet market specs, identifying your most productive ewes and track the kilograms of lambed wean per ewe, feedlot management, using carcass feedback, which we're now seeing come through a bit more from abattoirs, and hopefully that will continue to improve, and we'll see some quite good feedback coming back to help producers identify those underperforming animals or any issues on farm, and genetic evaluation once again. So technology used for cattle, obviously very similar traits. Once again, we're chasing really those carcass traits and meat traits. So we're looking to utilise weight and growth rates once again to meet market specs. We can utilise that auto drafting for management groups based on weight and condition score. There's remote weighing, which is becoming a little bit more predominant, and certainly a lot of interest in that. Recording pregnancy outcomes, management of feedlot cattle, and your genetic evaluation. And I think one thing to note at the minute, obviously, it's mandatory for cattle to actually use electronic identification as part of the NLAS scheme. So there's quite a good, I'm trying to think of the right word, it's actually amazing the amount of cattle producers that are out there that don't utilise the benefits of ERD. So you're already paying for the tag, which on a whole property basis is going to be your most expensive part of getting into ERD. And so there's lots of ways that you could actually invest in something as simple as a stick reader to start taking advantage of some individual animal management and improve productivity without having a large outlay to get into it. PIRSA have developed quite a good fact sheet for that, and that's the shortcut for that just there. I really just wanted to touch on correlated traits before I move into some other technologies. So, and the main reason for that is because we're, with the use of ERD, where, you know, and individual animal management, it's just to make sure that there's that understanding out there that when you select for just one trait, that it is actually going to have an impact on other aspects of production within your system. So there's two main things to consider with that. It's the raw data, which is affected by many influences, including genetics, birth type, and environment. So we need to be mindful of just using raw data as a decision if we don't balance it by taking in those other influences. And that's where your Merino Select, Lamb Plan and Breed Plan come in, because when they're providing you with breeding values, they're obviously taking out those influences. And also trait correlations. So by selecting for one trait, you may see an increase in another trait, which is a positive correlation, or a decrease, which is a negative correlation. And a great example of that was with the advent of on-farm wool testing in the early 2000s. There was a really big push for everyone to lower their micron. And what we had was a very big decrease in fleece weight across board. And then there was quite a lot of corrective breeding taking place to try and get some fleece weight back on animals. So just to be very mindful when you're selecting for one trait, it can have that flow-on effect to other traits within your system. So PIRSA, through their red meat and wool program, are putting together quite a good flyer on what to look for with correlated traits, and this is just a snapshot of that. So, and it's also produced by the information that's available on all those Breed Plan and Merino Select Lamb Plan sites as well. So just to make sure you're aware of that, and hopefully that information will come up on the PIRSA website as they get those resources finalised. And I've got the references for those at the end of the presentation. So I think I've thrown a lot of information at you on ERD and collecting individual data on animals. And of course, with that, we need a way to be able to manage and utilise that information. And that's where the data support systems and software comes into place. And we're seeing quite a variety of programs out there to help producers manage their data. So we have Cool Collect and Cool Perform by Sapien. You've got Stockbook. You've got AgriWeb, which are about to incorporate, and they may have already, individual animal management into their systems. You have Breed Elite, which is based from Kangaroo Island. You've got Maya, Grazing and AgWorld, which are farm management software, but they don't have the individual animal component as yet. And you can, of course, if you're good on Excel, you can actually utilise quite a lot of tools within that. Oops, sorry. To manage your data as well. And then, as I said, those smart scale heads, for a lot of producers, that's all they need with the information that's provided with those. And it's really about doing your homework to what you're trying to achieve to know what the best support system or software is to purchase for your property. Just quickly, 5 common ERD mistakes to avoid. It's very much, this is a slide that Sapien had at their talks, and it's very much what I'm seeing as well from quite a while ago now, but it's still exactly the same, is no clear goal, not knowing what you want to achieve, and not really doing that homework in how do you know if you've achieved it. Not seeking good advice, always do your homework, ask neighbours, specialists and product manufacturers about what's working well, what's not. Buying the wrong equipment, just understanding what you're trying to achieve and what's needed to achieve it. Most of the equipment that's out there now is so much better than what has been there. A lot of them, if there's any updates, it'll be a software update, which is just comes automatic, that you can just connect your device, whether that's your smart scale or your stick reader, to the internet, and you can update that software and have that latest running on your device as is. So if it's actually going to meet purpose, you don't need to have that fear of missing out on something bigger and better coming out the next day. not using the data within our business. We collect a lot of data for clients, and I'm sure that at least half of that's not being utilised effectively. So just to make sure that collecting the data is an investment that's not realised until a decision is actually made based upon the data, which I think is a really valid point. And missed opportunity, you forget or don't know how to use the data. So that's where trying to make sure you have support systems in place. If you're going to go down this path, just make sure there's someone that's going to take ownership of that within your business. And it may mean outsourcing the parts that you're not confident doing, because there's nothing more frustrating than being stuck trying to get something to work and spending hours on it, and you have a loss in production because of it, when you can actually outsource that and get someone to do that quite quickly and easily for you. So moving on to probably more applicable for you guys is the technology for the pastoral zone. So really you need technology that is labour saving. It's going to allow remote management, improve stock handling and management. And in a lot of ways, it can be very similar to the issues faced by oil producers, but it's generally on a much larger scale, and therefore the applications of technology can be unique. And I think that's a really interesting thing that I see out there is the way pastoral producers think and how you adapt something that's being used on the inside country to your situations and make some significant gains in your business by doing that. So there's some really interesting things being done out there at the minute. And I'm sure you'll hear more about that as technology is becoming a very, very topical as we're moving forward in the industry. So individual animal management principles still apply, and opportunities still exist for better usage of this in pastoral areas. And once again, that's where I raised about the cattle NLIS tags being mandatory. But there's a few producers that are really using these for management purposes on property. So there's a great opportunity for cattle producers to pick up on that. And there's actually a really good, if you're interested, the Making More from Sheep efficient pastoral production little module is really interesting and worth a read. It is a little, it's not so much outdated, but it's a little older, but the principles still apply. And it's just a really good reminder of things to consider when you're looking to implement new technologies, not just ERD, but all new technologies, and how to make sure that it's cost effective and is going to drive some productivity. So technology that's out there, predominantly going to tick the box for the pastoral zone, is the telemetry and water monitoring systems. There has been, especially coming out of a drought, a huge amount of interest in this, and you've got companies that include Observant, FarmBot and Intuit that are out there, and there's actually others as well that I'm not all over their equipment, so I haven't mentioned them, but certainly not limited to those three. There's been a lot of interest in managing water quality with magnets or desalination plants. The manual sheep handlers, which apply very much to the pastoral zone in that you're still trying to, so where ERD may not be applicable, some form of assistance in improving sheep handling can be. So there's things like the combi clamp. Sheep yard design and management, e.g. electrodip. Also seeing a lot of producers looking predominantly at their sheep yards, and a lot of improvement across board, not just in pastoral, but everywhere in that. So it's been really good to see that investment back into the livestock industry. And I mean, that obviously makes a big difference for the animals that you're trying to bring through, but also on your people management and trying to work in poor yards compared to working in good yard design. And that's obviously applicable for cattle as well. So there's options for innovation and technology to improve productivity, and it's about minimising risk, and these are being expanded and driven by industry. So seeing a lot of progress and a lot of new things happening, especially as that demand has really increased for it. So the companies are really putting a lot of resources behind this, and we're seeing a lot of development. When we're looking at smart tags, other tags that are out there, AWI has developed a smart tag. It is a solar powered tag, which you can see there on the sheet, and it measures the acceleration of a moving animal, so it's a bit like a Fitbit for sheep, and it tracks its movement and proximity to other animals in the paddock. So its uses are predominantly for predation and welfare alerts, improved reproduction and optimising grazing strategies. I'm not all over how this has progressed recently, but they certainly sound quite promising for the industry. GPS ear tags. These, we now have one company that's got them commercialised and out there, and in speaking to them, and that is the movement one, they're seeing that being picked up predominantly by pastoral producers, and its ability is to track and trace cattle over long distances. So it's a bigger ear tag. So at this stage, I don't know of any for sheep that are out there, unless it's going with the collar mode one. They're reusable and they're powered by a battery and an integrated solar panel. Obviously, it allows the GPS location of cattle. You can have alerts for animal movement. So if the animal's stopped, so it may be injured or unwell, or if it's jumped a fence and moved out of a designated area, and optimising grazing strategies. So viewing grazing patterns and making some decisions based on that. So you also have Ceres tag as well, that I believe are very close to commercialising as well. And that's the link to those two websites. And there's some really good information on those websites about the benefits of these tags. So I think they are quite an exciting development in the industry. I always get asked about virtual herding, so also known as eShepherd or virtual fencing. It is developed by CSIRO and Adjacents, and it basically is a system that enables the livestock to be confined or moved without using fixed fences. So it's the virtual fencing technology that uses coordinates, wireless technologies and sensors to control the location of the livestock without the need for an actual fence. So currently it's been released in Queensland and Tasmania, and as far as I know, it hasn't been released yet in other states. But I know South Australia is really pushing to allow that. The big group, which is the Barossa Improved Grazing Group, did run a trial of this in the Barossa, and it was just keeping cattle out of it was some protected pasture, I believe, and I've got the link there to have a look at their findings. But it worked really well. The YouTube link there actually is the Adjacents link, and that has got a short video there of how it works. And it does look really promising as well. It's quite costly still at this stage, but it's also at the early stages of development. But once again, it's being commercialised and it's out there happening. So we should see lots more information coming through on that. At this stage, sheep are way off, and you can see there on the picture, the cattle has got the solar panel and the tag on the top, and that's just a counterweight down the bottom to actually hold it in situ. So at this stage, obviously that technology is too large for sheep, although it is being trialled with a collar on animals in universities at the moment. And just lastly, looking at some of the other technologies that are there, Optiway is a weighing platform that's done remotely that has got a solar panel you can see on the top To power it, the animal comes in, it's got a panel reader there, it'll read the animal. It uses an algorithm based on the animal's size. So as it comes in, it's just got the front feet on the platform to estimate the weight, and it's going to give you an idea of your weight gain and weights of those animals for market without actually having to get those animals in. So it has an attractant, whether that's a leak block or something there for the cattle to come in. So there's been a lot of interest in that as well. And of course, we've always got walkover weighing, which has been around for a little bit with the cattle. I haven't heard any progression with that with sheep, and it was more just associated with that smaller animal coming through the system to get that accuracy up. So I think that's been a very quick talk about some of the technologies that are out there that I think can be utilised in the pastoral zone to make some good gains within your businesses. Obviously, it's quite broad, so for further information, I've just provided a few shortcuts there. The PIRSA red meat and wool program has developed some resources which should be available on their website. There is a 2.5K grant for livestock tech providers to assist set up and problem solve, and there's also grant available. You need like a 50% co-invest of that $7,500 into new technology, which is worth having a look at. So if you're not aware of that, just to go to that shortcut there for the red meat and wool growth program for more information for PIRSA. There's also producer tech sites being developed, and I know there's some technology talks coming up at Hawker, which may be of interest soon, and they will be advertised shortly, so you should see some of that information come through. But thank you very much for asking me to talk today. I'm happy to take any questions if there's any, and I'm happy for people to follow up later if they'd like to. So thanks, Paul.